So the next chapter is electromagnetic induction, EMI. So the basis of this chapter or this concept is something like this. In previous chapters we've already learned this, that a current can give rise to or can create or produce magnetic field. A current can produce magnetic field. Actually, we saw that in Ørsted experiment. Ørsted was one of the first people to have noticed this, and then using Ørsted's observation, Biot-Savart confirmed. Not only did he confirm, but he also gave an expression for magnetic field, that dB is equal to mu naught by 4 pi I dl sine theta divided by r squared, and that's Biot-Savart's law for you. But yeah, we're not here to discuss all those things all over again. But the thing which is pretty obvious from previous chapters is this, that current now it can be of any shape. Right now the diagram that you see on the screen right now is of the case where you have a long straight wire which is giving magnetic field. We'll discuss about that in a minute. But yeah, there are so many other shapes like which we also discussed in previous class, like you have solenoid, you have toroid, or you have wire of any shape. In fact Biot-Savart, while describing Biot-Savart's law, we used the wire of random shape. This was dl and whatnot, right? Yeah, and this distance was r, and then angle between dl vector and r vector was theta, and then this leads to that law where the current is I. All right, we're not here to discuss all these things again. The point of this discussion is something like this. And by the way, yeah, the diagram that you see here, the one with the red concentric circles, is just one such case where a current can give rise to magnetic field. So imagine this yellow color line here is the current carrying straight wire. It's actually a long wire. This is a long wire, but I've chosen a part of it. If the current is in this direction, then magnetic field due to that current will be concentric circles like this, and I can go on drawing so many other concentric circles. How do I decide that direction? By doing something like this. You basically grab that wire with your right hand. This has to be your right hand. I've tried to draw this right hand. Let's see. So this right here is your thumb, and then these are your fingers. And yeah, if you grab that wire, a straight wire carrying current I, with your right hand at any cost, and then curl your fingers around it, then the curled fingers will give the magnetic field. Now look at this. If you grab the wire like this and curl your fingers, it will be giving you the direction of magnetic field, something like that. The fingers are sort of curling like this, right? And that's the direction of magnetic field, which you can see it here. Look at this. Look at these concentric circles, right? So magnetic field line or magnetic field is in that direction. It's kind of like this. If let's say the wire lies on the screen of the system on which you're watching this, then at this point right here, the field lines are actually going in, and at this point on the screen itself, the field lines are coming out. So field lines are sort of, at this point, if you draw a tangent, field lines will be perpendicular to your screen, coming towards you. And if you sort of draw a tangent there, it will be like going inside the board or going inside the screen perpendicular to you. Anyway, now this is just one example that we have already learned in previous classes. Now the point of this chapter is, okay, now let's get to the real deal, that if this can happen, the thing in the green color here can happen. If you have learned, if current can produce magnetic field, the question is, can reverse happen, right? So the question that we have, and obviously this question will obviously strike one's mind, right? And earlier, even before that, we thought that electricity or electrostatics has got nothing to do with magnetism and magnetostatics. We thought they are two completely different fields, right? But eventually, from previous chapters, we have learned this, that they're not as different as we thought they would be in 17th century or 16th century or so, right? So they are interrelated, but the only thing is, right now, let's say on this side of the pool, you have electrostatics and concepts associated with it, and on this side of the pool you have magnetism and concepts associated with it. And let's say you have some sort of, I don't know, it's a good analogy for that. Let's say you have some sort of river or something in between those two. Okay, some sort of river going on between these two. What we have realized in our previous chapters though, that electricity can clearly produce magnetic field. So we have sort of a bridge which can take us from this side to that side. We have a bridge which can take us from this side to that side, from electrostatics to magnetism. We kind of have that already. But the question obviously is the reverse bridge possible? Is it just one-way track, or this is like a two-way track? Can you come backwards? Can magnetic field give rise to some sort of electrostatic phenomena or electricity phenomena? Let's see that. So, an answer to that is actually yes, which I think will be obvious by now. But let's see the experiments we try to do in order to convince ourselves that the reverse bridge is also possible. Let's see. So we'll do for this a small experiment called coil bar magnet experiment, coil and magnet experiment. Okay, not an experiment as such, but yeah. And I hope you remember what galvanometer is, right? What's a galvanometer? Galvanometer basically is a device which is used to identify or detect the current. So we'll make use of that. But in the meantime, let's see what was going on here. So you have a coil with multiple turns or single turns, doesn't really matter. So let's say we have a coil of multiple turns. Okay, so we'll take a coil with a bunch of turns. Okay, so yeah, I think you get the idea, right? And this coil is one end of the open end. This is like take a longer wire and connect it to a galvanometer, and the other end of the wire, this is your galvanometer, the one with the G is your galvanometer, and the other end to the other end of the galvanometer. So you have this coil, and yeah, a galvanometer to detect if there is current in the coil. Okay. Also, what we have is we have a bar magnet. Okay, it's a coil bar magnet experiment, right? So obviously we gotta have bar magnet. So let's say this is that bar magnet that we're talking about, and let's say this end is the north pole. Okay, this end is the north pole of the bar magnet, and this end is the south pole of the bar magnet. And what you're going to do now is you're going to move this bar magnet in this direction. This is just a direction in which I'll be moving the bar magnet. Okay, but before we do that, let's see what happened. Okay, before we start moving. So things like this. First, what happened was obviously, but yeah, before that, notice this one more thing, that this coil is not connected to any sort of source of EMF. So there's no battery. There's only galvanometer to find out if there is current or not. There's no battery, so there is obviously no current in it. All you have is a conducting coil wound like that. Okay, now with nothing, obviously there is no deflection in galvanometer. However, we are trying to see if magnetic field can give rise to current, right? Because current can give rise to magnetic field. We are trying to answer that question. So obviously, without the bar magnet, say bar magnet was to begin with was far away, maybe at infinity, right? When the bar magnet was not even there, it was completely isolated coil. So then definitely there will be no current, right? So I'll just mention those things here. So case 1, isolated coil. In case of an isolated coil, the current is obviously 0. So current is obviously 0. Okay, second case, I'll bring the bar magnet close. Okay, so I'll start bringing the bar magnet close. I'll write that once I'm done discussing. Okay, so if I start bringing this bar magnet, obviously I'll be starting from infinity, and slowly I'll start moving in this direction. Okay, and eventually at one point or the other, the bar magnet will have come close enough to have its effect. Okay, now we don't know if there will be effect or not, but let's say we're doing such experiment for the first time. Let's say we're just hypothesizing this, that magnetic field can give current. Okay, so you start bringing the bar magnet from infinity closer to the coil. Once it starts approaching close enough, the galvanometer actually in fact started showing deflections. Okay, so that sort of gives us a hope for this bridge, the reverse bridge from magnetism to electrostatic. That bridge, it gives us a hope for that, right? So when that happened, so you thought, okay, a bar magnet near a coil can give magnetic field. Okay, it did give. But also at the same time, you know what happened? While we were bringing this bar magnet from infinity, once it was close enough, the galvanometer started showing deflection. We are still moving. Remember, we are still moving. Okay. But you know what happened? We went close enough. We went, in fact, very close. Somewhere that close. We went that close. Okay. And let's say we stopped there. Okay. Let's say we stopped there. Then suddenly galvanometer was showing zero deflection. Notice please listen to every word I'm saying here. Okay. So when the galvanometer went close, and then stopped, then suddenly the galvanometer stopped showing deflection. And galvanometer stopped showing deflection should mean that there is no current there, right? So you know, that makes one think that it's not only magnetic, because see, obviously when the bar magnet is here, the magnetic field is definitely going to be weaker than when the bar magnet is here. Closer the magnetic field, stronger will be the magnetic field line, right? We have seen that in the previous chapter, where magnetic field is inversely proportional to square of distance. So obviously the magnetic field over here is less than the magnetic field over here, right? However, when it was far away but still moving, you had current, as opposed to when it is close and not moving, it did not have current. Okay. So it's not just the magnetic field. One observation, second observation, let me first write second observation, that magnetic field can give rise to current. Okay, magnetic field can give rise to current. So that was obvious. But third point, we noticed something strange, right? A moving bar magnet gave magnetic field, but a static bar magnet did not give magnetic field. So that would make me think it's not the magnetic field that can give rise to current. So I'm inclined to, you know, sort of discard this statement, because magnetic field could give, yeah, I know magnetic field is obviously giving current, but the problem is even here in this case, when the bar magnet is closer, I have magnetic field, right? So that makes me, you know, to change this statement a little bit and maybe write, it's not just a magnetic field, but maybe a changing magnetic field. Oh, that makes more sense, right? So a changing magnetic field can give rise to current. Okay, fine. But then, okay, we'll at the third point, actually I'm soon going to discard that also by saying this. You know what happened now? If instead of a coil, there's a reason why we have a coil here. Instead of a coil, if I had you know, some sort of just a straight wire, if I just have a wire, no current or whatsoever in this, okay, and then I start bringing a bar magnet closer to it, with of course the north pole facing it, south pole with south pole away from it. Instead of a coil, if I simply have a wire, then there will be no current in this. Okay, that makes us think, what's the difference between a straight wire and a coil? What's the difference? I think is that this has some sort of loop, and I can in fact talk about its flux. But this, on the other hand, is just a wire, right? I can't really talk about its flux, because let me quickly remind you this, that magnetic flux we'll use a symbol phi with a subscript b for that, magnetic flux, because we already used the symbol phi for electrostatic flux, right? So magnetic flux phi b, that's funny, phi b is equal to the magnetic field, just like the electric flux definition, guys. So b dot delta s, b dot delta s, instead of e dot delta s in electric flux, we have b dot delta s here, or b into delta s into cos theta, b into delta s into cos theta. Okay, so that's magnetic flux. Now the question is, if this wire has no cross sectional area, how will it have flux at all, right? And there was no, and the evidence that there was no current in this case, there was no current in this case, is evidence enough for us to conclude this, that you don't just need magnetic field, you are actually going to need the magnetic flux, right? So eventually, as it turns out, that even this statement is wrong, and then that brings us to a final conclusive sort of statement, that changing magnetic flux, not field, can give rise to current, Okay, so obviously in case of isolated coil, current is 0, that is pretty obvious, but magnetic field can give rise to current. It's actually correct, but is magnetic field alone? This I shouldn't have completely struck it off, because magnetic field can in fact give rise to current. So it's not completely wrong, this statement, second statement number 2. But the thing is, it's not just the magnetic field which is going to be enough. Then I realized that maybe changing magnetic field we need, and turns out that is also not true. What we finally concluded from our observation is that you need a changing magnetic flux to have current. But eventually, one good thing about all this experiment, coil and bar magnet experiment, is this, that now we have a reverse bridge. We have a bridge from this magnetic field town to electrostatic town, right? Magnetism town to electrostatic town, right? So that sort of creates, like, they're codependent. It's like you can if you have a current that's enough to study everything about magnetic field, or if you happen to have magnetic field, then that's enough to study the entire electrostatics, and they're sort of more related to each other than you would think. In fact, things get a little interesting in future. What's going to happen tomorrow in one of the chapters later is this bridge, which bridge, this bridge right here, from electric town to magnetic town. This bridge has a crack in it. It has a crack in it. Okay, that there's a crack in it. Okay, and that crack was actually a huge problem for us. Okay, we thought that they are like completely independent of each other, but there was a crack in the bridge. Then it's like that was a problem which was then addressed by a genius called Maxwell. We'll talk about that in next chapter. That is not one of the chapters, we'll see. Okay, yeah, so that's that, and let's now write for the conclusion from what we observed, something like this. So from coil and bar magnet experiment, this is obvious that a changing, and this is a very important sentence that I'll be writing, a changing magnetic flux, gives rise to or produces, maybe instead of current, can I say EMF? Because obviously if you have current, there has to be EMF. There is no current without potential difference, right? So I can, instead of just writing current, I can end up writing EMF. So changing magnetic flux produces EMF. All right, fine. But then obviously the next question that people should be asking, okay, you say that changing magnetic flux is giving us EMF. The only obvious question after that is this, that how much is this EMF? The next obvious question is how much then? Okay, how much is this EMF? Okay, to answer that, one more thing we also realized here in this coil bar magnet experiment. As it turns out that if the motion is rapid, you can bring the bar magnet closer in many ways, right? You can bring the bar magnet from far away to near to the coil, you know, with different velocities, right? And with different velocities, the rate of change of magnetic flux is different, right? Faster the motion, at faster rate is the flux changing, right? And as it turns out, the more rapid the motion of the bar magnet was, the greater was deflection in the galvanometer. And you know this, that if the galvanometer deflects more, that current is definitely more, and if current is more, obviously from Ohm's law we know that EMF is more, right? So that sort of brought us to this conclusion. So and then to answer this, how much, first we have first observation we had was this, that the more rapid or faster the movement, the more rapid the changing flux is, greater is EMF. These were just the observations, and eventually later on Faraday gave us the law of electromagnetic induction, which I'll be writing it very soon now. Okay, so I'm going to use that space. Okay, so that brings us to Faraday's law, which will eventually be giving us, let's choose a nice color of that. So that brings us to Faraday's law, which is going to answer this question: how much is the EMF? You say there is EMF, then how much is the EMF? The answer to that, and this is actually called, Faraday has given two laws, and this is his second law, but we'll only be learning second law in physics. So Faraday's law of electromagnetic induction goes something like this, that the EMF induced, you know, the word induced is very interesting here, because this is not some EMF that you have created, you know, by chemical reactions or you know, by producing electric field, right? This is an induced EMF. How did this EMF got induced? Due to changing magnetic flux. So that is a nice term there. Anyway, the EMF induced in a coil basically is directly proportional to rate of change of flux, magnetic flux, so basically EMF E is proportional to d phi b, that is magnetic flux, d phi b by dt, and you know, later the proportionality constant turns out to be 1. So the I don't have much space here, so I'll just write the proportionality constant after some experiments turned out to be 1, and today we write EMF E as simply d phi b, that is change in magnetic flux divided by change in time. So that's your Faraday's law equation right there. Okay, so I hope that's clear. This is your Faraday's law. Actually, very soon there's a little negative sign that will be coming here. We'll discuss about that negative sign, how did we reach there and all that, maybe in the next video, hopefully. Okay, so yeah, so this was sort of, actually there are two more experiments to, you know, this is all I did was a coil and bar magnet experiment. There are two more experiments, like coil and coil experiment, and then there is two coils. There are two more coil and coil experiments actually, but that you can, they are pretty simple and that you can understand by yourself if you just go through NCERT books once. Okay, so this they're more like this experiment only, so I don't want to explain that in detail much. So yeah, so that's that. And